Hello and welcome to The Game Changers. I'm Sue Anstis, and this is the podcast where you'll hear from trailblazing women in sport who are quite literally knocking down barriers and challenging the status quo for women and girls everywhere. What can we learn from their journeys as we explore some of the key issues around equality in sport and beyond? I'd like to start with a big thank you to our partners Sport England, who support the Game Changers podcast through a National Lottery Award. My guest today is Kristen Dusting, a silver medalist for England in the 2014 Roller Derby World Cup, a multi-medal winning skater for London Roller Derby. Kristen has been playing roller derby in London since the sport's beginnings in the UK in 2006 and has been very much part of growing this grassroots women's and non-binary sport from the ground up, not just within the UK, but globally. In those 18 years, Kristen's held many roles within the sport, including head of training, director, captain, freelance coach and representative for the Women's Flat Track Derby Association. When not skating or coaching, Kristen owns a roller derby skate shop where she combines her passion for the sport with roller skates and the wonderful roller derby community. She continues to play for London Roller Derby's top team, London Brawling, who are currently ranked number 1 in Europe and hope to make it to the 2024 World Championships in Portland, Oregon. Kristen is incredibly proud to be part of a sport that is so revolutionary, loudly LGBTQ+ inclusive, actively anti-racist and women and non-binary led. Kristen, can I start by asking you to tell us more about roller derby, especially for those who might not be as familiar with this incredible inclusive sport?
Well, to start with, there is no ball. So that's often the question that we're asked, where's the ball? So there is no ball. How the sport is played is you have 2 teams of 5 skaters. Each team has a point scorer, and they are called the jammer. So the jammer's role is to pass the opposing blockers as many times as they can within like little short 2-minute periods. And the catch is there's 4 blockers trying to stop them from doing that. And then there's also 4 blockers on their team who are offensively trying to get them past the opposition. So it's offense and defense at the same time. All looks very chaotic, but what you see is lots of fast skating, big hits, like very technical skating.
And can you describe a little bit of what it's like at a roller derby match as an experience? And if I'm honest, I have watched quite a few videos in the last few weeks. It looks a little bit frightening to watch from a spectator side, but what it's like to actually be a part of it and play.
Yeah, I think you're right. When you're watching it, you're like, whoa, do I actually do this? Because it's pretty brutal. But I think because I started when everyone was terrible, you kind of learnt as you went along. And actually, when you're playing it, it doesn't feel particularly aggressive or contacty, even though, you can watch footage afterwards and you're like, oh yeah, I went flying across the floor all through the game. I feel like for me personally, playing it is very almost like cool, calm and collected.
And the sport's obviously been through a few evolutions since the 1920s, from an endurance spectacle to a highly competitive sport. So if you can, I feel I'm asking you lots to give us the history, but a little potted history of kind of where it came from and the evolution of it that we see today.
Yeah, definitely. So it started off as like a post-Depression era game in the States. It was just a skate race, basically, like endurance race. And then the kind of promoters realized the bits that the audience loved to see were the bits where people were crashing into each other. And so from then on, they kind of invented this game where, you sort of smashed into each other. That went all through kind of 50s, 60s, a bit of a TV kind of version of it in the 70s, and then, just sort of died out. Then in, I believe it was 2004, a group of women in Texas decided to kind of revive this game. They made up some rules. It was very punk rock, very DIY, very women-led. And then some other skaters from different areas around the States, sort of saw what they were doing there and emulated them. And then they started to play games together and, yeah, pretty much just invented this sport. It was still very much very punk rock, very spectacle based at the start. And yeah, then we kind of came along in 2006 and we were started by two women that had played in the States, or had seen a few games in the States, so knew kind of this, underground thing that was going on, this like revolution in women's sport. And yeah, they were living in London and decided to start a roller derby team. So that was about April 2006.
And so many sports today, the majority of team sports have men as the originators and still as the rule makers. And it's fabulous that's not really the case for roller derby. So why do you feel, as someone that's so involved in the sport, that is so important?
Oh, I just think being able, not having a mold that we sort of started off in, not being in the shadow of the men's sport, not feeling like that the men's sport is the default version of the sport and that we're playing catch up. At the time, it just felt like a really empowering, revolutionary, like cool thing that you were doing, like with your cool girlfriends. And I think as the sport has kind of progressed, it's meant being able to create something that we want to see as women and non-binary people, rather than, trying to fit in with whatever the man's version of the sport is. So we've been able to build things from the ground up in, I don't know, more of a community kind of based way, and I guess a version of what we want to see in the world.
And that revolutionary element, I absolutely feel that appears so foundational to the sport, and the fact that it embodies female empowerment, has that just grown over time? So the pieces we saw at the very beginning, 2006, has that just evolved as time's gone on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's one of our like core things that is very, very important to us, that we are, not just like run and owned by skaters, but that we're run and owned by women and non-binary skaters. It's definitely something that we feel very, very strongly about. And I mean, I think it was maybe something at the start that, I don't know, what we didn't so much have an awareness of what that meant in the outside world, but I think now we feel this responsibility and a very keen awareness of how the rest of the world operates and how we want to hold that power for ourselves.
And I've heard a lovely quote that roller derby flips the switch on what it means to be feminine. And many female sports, as we know, have kind of objectified female competitors for the male gaze, whereas roller derby turns its head on this. It disregards those gender norms and stereotypes. So is that something that attracted you to the sport and has made it appealing to you as time's gone on?
I mean, I think when I started, gosh, that's a hard question. I feel like I was kind of raised in a very sporty environment. My dad was a high school PE teacher growing up, and I came from a very sporty Australian family. So in terms of sport, we were always encouraged to play sport and play competitively. So I think my personal experience is very different from women who felt like that they were excluded from sports, usually, when you start high school and that sort of thing. So, but I have an understanding of how important that is for a lot of my teammates. I guess like when we sort of first started, again, it was that kind of punk rock DIY and a lot of outlandish costumes and face makeup and that sort of thing. And that was fun. That was just really, really fun. I think as time has kind of progressed, we have actually become a little bit more like sporty and serious, or I say a little bit, a lot. You look at the uniforms now and, it's fairly kind of generic, sportsy. But I think there's kind of a power in that, that we're not just reduced to being a sideshow, that we are actually elite athletes, who can still have fun, who still certainly have fun at the after party, who, you're kind of adding a little twist on what it means to be a powerful and strong woman, non-binary person.
And is there a bit of a challenge there when you say you're progressing down a more competitive, and I believe actually it was potentially to be an Olympic sport in 2020, but does that move away from the roots of the costumes and the makeup and the kind of anarchy feel of the sport in its origins? How does the sport balance those two elements?
I think there's room for everything. Yeah, I think as we sort of got more competitive in terms of how we were playing and how good we were, and that we wanted to win games and that sort of thing, and progress the sport in that way rather than it just being entertainment. There was definitely a big change from that sort of original antics, sort of thing. But the modern roller derby that you see now, nothing is staged, nothing is, like wrestling or anything like that. But what you do see is different types of playing the game. So, you'll see little tournaments kind of pop up that might be full of challenge teams. And like a challenge team is, like tall people versus small people. I don't know, like some funny costume versus some other funny costume. And that's kind of just played for fun, like totally for fun, like a five-a-side, kind of thing. And so as the sport has progressed, there's different entry levels into the sport. So, I mean, certainly kind of the higher up that you go becomes a lot more serious. But yeah, there's definitely scope for playing in whatever way you want to, really.
And you mentioned growing up in Australia. So how did you come to sport? How did you first find roller derby?
So I'd been living here since 2004. And I kind of hadn't really found my people yet. And in October 2006, a friend of mine who had also come over from Australia happened to find a flyer advertising for new recruits. And she'd known that I'd skated when I was younger in Australia, and asked if I wanted to go along with her and just, kind of keep her company. And I had a vague idea of what roller derby was like from the 70s for some reason. I think my mum had watched it on TV or something. And I thought it would just be you'd go along to a skating rink, and at some point they'd be like, and now time for the roller derby, and you'd just smash into each other. And I thought that sounds pretty cool. I could do that. And I actually I had no idea that it was actually like a brand new sport, very DIY. Literally, there was 5 people rolling around in a circle. And, I use the term rolling lightly, generously. And I basically went to my first training session, and I could still skate, which was great. Picked everything up quite easily and just had a really great time. And I remember we all went out to the pub after the training session, and I felt like for me it was the first time, meeting a group of people since moving to London, not having any family and friends here. And I just remember being on the tube on the way home and thinking this is the thing that you're going to stick with. This is the thing that even if you don't feel like going to training, even if you're tired, you're going to go and you're going to stick with this. And I guess nearly 18 years later, here I am.
It certainly has. And is it big in cities, in kind of urban areas, at universities? Where's the growth of the sport in the UK?
Oh God, everywhere. I mean, the landscape may be a little bit different post-COVID. Obviously with COVID, everything stopped, but kind of I don't know, it can be quite interesting which teams sort of end up at the top. So ourselves, Rainy City, who are in Manchester, the team in Birmingham was the second team in the UK. Middlesbrough, have been up there. Newcastle, the team in Cardiff, Tiger Bay, are really awesome. But yeah, pretty much any town, any city, even any area that might be drawing from, kind of a number of towns, you're going to find a roller derby league. Yeah.
And you've obviously gone on to play, as I mentioned in the introduction, across the world. You've won various medals and championships. So what is it you think that makes someone great at roller derby on a competitive level?
Oh, I think you've got to be a tad obsessed. Um, you've got to have a like insatiable drive and hunger and ambition, and a little bit of uh, obsessive, like cult-like kind of tendencies. That's personality traits. In terms of actually being good at the sport, you have to know how to roller skate. I feel like you do need to have a really good understanding of yourself and being able to look at the game and analyze the game, strategize. You have to be very good at plow stopping and bending your knees.
And can you tell us, it's interesting, isn't it, that whole piece around whether you might have had Olympic inclusion, but can you tell us a bit more about the competitive structure for roller derby across the world? How is that set up and how has that evolved?
Yeah, so we are under an organisation called the Women's Flat Track Derby Association, so the WFTDA. They were started maybe a couple of years after roller derby had started again in the States, and it was basically representatives from, the handful of teams that existed that decided to kind of get together and come up with rules that meant that you could play against each other, come up with a competitive structure. So this was all very, basic, made from the ground up. There was no structure for it. Technically, roller sports do generally come under a governing body. In the States, it was USARS, over here, BRSF. However, in the early days, those organizations basically wanted nothing to do with us. They just thought we were a bunch of crazy women on roller skates, that smashed into each other. So the WFTDA kind of went its own way and was not part of USARS. And that's kind of become a little bit of a similar thing globally, where as well as being, sort of skater run within our own organizations, we want to govern our sport ourselves as well. So in the UK, we come under the BRSF. However, we are classed as associated members. So we technically receive nothing from the BRSF. We've never received any funding to this day.
Wow.
There was a UK Roller Derby Association that was started in the same kind of vein as the WFTDA, that actually disbanded during COVID. The organisation decided that it just in its current form wasn't relevant to what was needed. So at the moment we're kind of ungoverned, other than most teams do, whether or not you're a member of the WFTDA, most teams prescribe to kind of the rule set and the policies of the WFTDA. So the WFTDA is our governing body, but what that means in terms of road to the Olympics, there isn't a road to the Olympics, because you need to go through your country's governing bodies, and that doesn't exist yet. There has been a lot of discussion about whether or not that's even something that we want for our sport, because there are a lot of stipulations, obviously, with the IOC. I guess a lot of that includes trans inclusion as well. So, yeah, there's a lot of discussion about whether or not that's actually something that we want for our sport.
And what do you feel in terms of that governance within the UK, within England? Is that something that you personally would like to see? And I guess then more access to funding and the kind of growth and development of the sport too?
I just think it's a tricky one, because, we've been going now for 17, 18 years, and we've just not really seen any access to that. So yes, I would love there to be funding, but I'm not entirely sure how we go about that. And that's kind of not my expertise at the moment anyway. I think maybe 10, 12 years ago, I was like very, very interested in that side of things. But at this point in my career, I'll leave that to the others.
And how successful is London Brawling as a team?
We are the most successful European team. We have been trailblazers for the sport. When we started, we just had this goal and ambition to be the first international team that was part of the WFTDA. And at that point, the WFTDA was only American. And we, kind of got in with them and wanted to show them that, that we thought we were pretty good. And we brought a team out from the States to play and had a great score against them. And then eventually we were invited to participate in like regional tournaments in the States. Yeah, then we were the first non-US team to make it to both the playoffs, so the US playoffs, and then the championships. We have been, I believe, at four championships, global championships in our time. We have sadly not won a medal at any of those ones. We continually finish fourth, so like the worst place to finish. So we've had the opportunity to win bronze a number of times and not done it. So yeah, we're team 4 forever.
And despite the fourth places, what are your most memorable moments or kind of highlights of your career?
To come to mind, I think the first time that we made it to champs, we kind of had gotten to this stage where every year we'd, upped our previous year's achievement, So, the first year that we made it to the regional playoffs in the States, we came in ranked 10th and no one thought we should have been there and all of that sort of stuff. And, we finished 5th. So people were like, oh, okay, maybe these guys are pretty good. And then the next year, I think we just missed out on playing off, for the game where you could go to champs. And then the year after it was close. And so we just kind of had this build year after year. And then we had this year where we knew this is the year that we're going to make it to champs. And we'd played a team called Rose City, who are based in Portland, Oregon. We'd played them during the season and we'd lost quite badly to them by about 40 points or something. So then they did the draw for the regional playoffs, and it was being held in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So we get to go to all of these very exotic places in the middle of nowhere in America. And they did the draw, and the first team that we had to play was Rose City. And so we had to beat Rose City to progress, through the bracket to potentially make it to champs. So we're like, okay, this is our nemesis team. We lost to them 4 months ago. How are we going to beat them? And the whole build-up was phenomenal. We just had the whole of Europe was supporting us, and it just felt like this building. It was amazing. And so we ended up beating them in an absolute nail biter by about 3 points, where it was controversial, and the game was over and everyone was looking at the scoreboard to see if no one really knew how many points had been scored. And yeah, we ended up beating them by 3 points, which meant that, we still had to play some other teams to make it through to champs, but they were actually the hardest team in the bracket, and we knew that. And that moment when we knew that we were going to champs for the first time was absolutely incredible. I'm going to cry now. And then my second was World Cup 2014. We were playing against Team USA, and Team USA, absolute powerhouse. They'd beaten everyone else in the whole World Cup, all the games, by 500 points. So, we weren't going to beat them, but we were hoping to have a good game against them. And we played in this incredible stadium in Dallas, proper American stadium with, massive seating, probably 4,000 capacity. We did have an absolutely incredible game against them. And it was the very last jam. My kind of best teammate friend, I knew she was retiring after that game. And we were both on the track at the same time. And we kind of looked at each other in the eye just before the the sort of play started, and I had to look away because I knew I was going to cry. And she had the most incredible jam against Team USA, you know, the best of the best players, scored points, and the final whistle went. And it was just this amazing moment where everyone from our team just went and kind of like jumped on top of her like a massive dog pile. And it just felt like it felt like we'd won. You know, it was kind of like Team USA, who even are they? It just felt the most like connection with this group of people that we'd been through so much together, you know, 10 years of building everything. And so to come out, you know, with a silver medal, but also just to celebrate this person and this moment, yeah, felt amazing.
Thank you so much. Beautiful, memorable moments. That wasn't what I was expecting, but that is lovely. And I think that says so much about the sport as well, too, doesn't it? That those are the moments that mean so much to you.
Oh, 100%. You know, when I think about what the sport has given me and what it means to me, it is those connections and the people and going through those challenges together and building something, creating something with this group of people is absolutely incredible.
And you talk about that success of the US team. So is the sport perceived differently out there? Does it have more awareness? Are there more facilities for it? How is it different to, you know, why are we not world champions?
Definitely facilities, 100%. Every little team in the States has either like a permanent venue that they train at. We're stuck with like little pokey sports halls where we're constantly fighting the badminton mafia for space. And yeah, it's very difficult finding venues. We're still training in the same venue that we've been training in the entire time, which just makes it difficult to grow. You know, we have a lot of people that want to play the sport, but as a completely volunteer-run organisation, we're bound by the amount of venue space and time that we can get, which is quite frankly never enough. So yeah, I think in the States, facilities, definitely a lot better. Even, you know, like very, very small towns will still have incredible spaces where they can train in.
And is that issue around facilities, which makes me cross because I think there can't be that hard, just sports halls, school halls, etc. But is that the same across the country? Is that something that's faced across the UK?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, I think being in London, everyone wants sports halls. So, I mean, you know, I don't want to say that it's particularly difficult for us here, but from what I know of all other teams, yes, having adequate venues to train in is extremely difficult. I mean, we train in far northwest London. If you live in South London, you know, some people have got an hour and a half, 2-hour commute both ways just to come to training. Yeah, so it is across the board, yeah, very difficult. And I mean, I think I had the privilege when I moved back to Melbourne for a couple of years, kind of 2009, and we ended up being able to hire our own warehouse. So to which they still train in to this day. And funnily enough, the team from Melbourne went and won the World Championships a couple of years ago. So definitely having your own facilities means you can train more, train harder, have a whole program that develops, you know, from the ground up, which, yeah, we just unfortunately can't do.
And why not? This is making me cross talking to you. I'm thinking, why is it not growing more? Because you feel everyone's looking for that inclusive, supportive, something a bit different to get women into the game, you know. So
here we are. Yeah.
So what is it, do you think, that's prevented that historically? Is it because you kind of skater run, skater led, you haven't had that kind of governance in place to get that? Do people hark back to the historical side that we talked about, that kind of entertainment and spectacle, that they don't see it as a serious sport with a pipeline through?
I think people just don't really even know that much about us. I mean, you do get the occasional sports hall that don't want people roller skating because it'll mark their floor, which is not true. But really, you're just one of many sports that are vying for time. From the community volleyball team to the badminton guys. For sports halls, you're just one of a million sports that wants to book the hall. I mean, our ideal situation is that we would have a permanent venue, but I'm not sure of our financial situation being able to do that. And to my knowledge, we've only ever received one funding grant, and that was actually like a COVID recovery grant from Sports England. And so our one grant that we'd received was when we weren't actually doing anything, and that was really just funds to kind of keep us trucking along, being able to pay our bills whilst we weren't doing anything.
And how open is the sport to those that just want to take part recreationally? Do you need to be a good skater to come and get involved?
No, so we train people from teaching them how to skate all the way through. We say you don't have to know how to skate, and that's 100% true. So we teach you to skate, and we kind of teach you like the non-contact roller derby skills that then would be required to go through the process. So we have 3 teams within our organisation. Our A team, B team, C team. And then we have kind of our group of pool skaters who are the ones like learning to play the game. I would love, and I think we would love for us to have the capacity to have a completely recreational team, like non-competitive sort of teams. But we just do not have the venue space, the time. Again, as a volunteer-led organisation, you need to have someone that wants to take that on. There's no paid positions in what we do. But yeah, our team is like quite competitive, but 100% there are other teams, that people can join that can play more recreationally, definitely.
And the sport appears to be hugely accessible, especially welcoming the LGBTQ plus community. Has that always been the case? And is that the same across the world for the sport?
Yeah, I think it has. Yeah, I mean, I think we could have a competition here with a few sports, but I dare say it's the gayest sport that exists. Absolutely always been loudly inclusive. And yes, I would say that is the same globally. Obviously, there are some countries where that is not okay to be out in that way. But I think we all know that it is a place that you can be safe, find community, be included. Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. And I also read that roller derby is very much a sport that's fantastic for mental health as well too. Is that something that you've seen with the teammates and players over the years?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say it's also a place where we're like very inclusive and aware of mental health as well. I think it's a place that you're playing the sport, but you've also got community. You've also got the opportunity to we all kind of have a role in running the organisation. So for a lot of people, it gives you purpose, it gives you friends, it gives you a support network. Of course, any form of exercise is going to be good for your mental health as well. I think for myself, I wasn't quite aware of just how much I needed it for my mental health. But when I kind of look back at when I started and, all the years that I was training, 3 or 4 times a week, I felt great. I felt really great. And then with COVID, when suddenly there was nothing, I was like, what's like... I've really noticed it, which was kind of definitely a learning curve for me.
And can you tell me about you, I guess, aside of the active skating, but in terms of the shop that you run and all that you've done there? So tell us about it, where it is, how we can find you.
So I own a roller skate shop called Double Threat Skates. It's in King's Cross in London. Basically, I moved back here from Melbourne and was like, oh, God, what am I going to do with my life? At that stage, I was cutting hair. I'd owned a barber shop, but that wasn't what I wanted to do with my life. And I just sort of thought, I wonder if I could open a roller skate shop, and got talking to a teammate of mine who happened to have owned an online roller skate shop in New Zealand. And within 4 weeks, we'd opened a roller skate shop. So that was 2013. I say we opened a roller skate shop. Actually, our entire team opened the roller skate shop for us because, one of our teammates was like, oh, I'm a shop designer. Someone else was like, oh, I'm a graphic designer. Oh, I know someone that's got this and I can drill holes in your wall. And so basically our entire team opened our roller skate shop for us.
Excellent. And how's it going a few years on?
Good. I mean, we're probably one of the only businesses that flourished during COVID, us and bicycles. So we've actually now expanded. When we first opened, we did just roller derby stuff. So we are niche within a niche within a niche. But we've seen an explosion in roller skating in general in the UK since COVID. So now we do all types of disciplines. So whether that's recreational, skating in the park, at the roller disco, jam skating or dance skating, which is like kind of break dancing on skates, is huge in the UK. Ramps and like park skating, is huge as well. So yeah, now we do the whole lot.
That's fantastic. I'll just come find you. Come find me next time I'm in London, King's Cross.
Definitely.
And I guess just in closing, what would you say to people, anyone listening to this podcast, thinking about getting involved in roller derby? What would be your kind of positioning of the sport to them?
Oh, God. I mean, it is transformative. So if you're looking for community, friends, exercise, like the funnest thing that you can do, then absolutely try roller derby. It has changed my life and I just couldn't recommend it highly enough.
Well, if that doesn't make you want to try roller derby, I'm not sure what would. Thanks so much to Kristen for such a great introduction to the sport. If you enjoyed the podcast, there are over 160 episodes featuring conversations with women's sports trailblazers that are free to listen to on all podcast platforms, or you can find them on our website at fearlesswomen.co.uk. As well as listening to all the podcasts on the website and finding out more about the guests, you can also discover the Women's Sport Collective, a free, inclusive network for all women working in sport. The whole of my book, Game On, The Unstoppable Rise of Women's Sport, is also free to listen to on the podcast. Every episode of Series 13 is me reading a chapter of the book. Thanks once again to Sport England for backing the Game Changers and the Women's Sport Collective through the National Lottery, and to Sam Walker at What Goes On Media, who does such a great job as our executive producer. Thank you also to my brilliant colleague at Fearless Women, Kate Hannon. You can find the Game Changers on all podcast platforms, and please follow us now so you don't miss out on future episodes. If you have a moment to leave a rating or a review, that would be fantastic, as it really does make a difference to help us reach new audiences. Do come and say hello on social media, where you'll find me on LinkedIn, Twitter and Instagram at Sue Anstis. The Game Changers. Fearless Women in Sport.